listening to Sasquatch Syndicate.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard.
And all the ape believers don't want any of the paranormal believers to say anything because they're all whacked and screwed up and we don't want them. And all the paranormal believers don't want, they're going to the ape believers saying, well, you're all closed-minded. You're not open to the fact that it does this and it does that.
And I look over my left shoulder and this creature is running through the woods and it's bulldozing the brush down. And I knew, man, this thing is going to get me.
Welcome to Sasquatch Syndicate. I'm your host, Chuck, out in Seattle, Washington, along with Paul in Portland, Oregon. Thanks to everyone for listening and those following us at SasquatchSyndicate.com and on our social media outlets. Happy April, everyone. We hope you're having an amazing spring season. Just a few updates. As many of you know, Paul and I are deep into the network production for the television series, and probably going in, we didn't understand everything we were getting involved in. Sometimes you just show up and see what happens. But I know that many of you have written into the show that you've noticed most of our social media channels had been removed. And that is true. The network is rebuilding everything. They also had to do some cleanup because we had a lot of trademark infringement on our logo. People had taken past episodes, built their own YouTube channels, but that seems to have been cleaned up or is being cleaned up.
So I think we're back on track.
So on to this month's podcast. With us tonight on Sasquatch Syndicate, we're joined by Samantha Ellen Ritchie. Samantha is a researcher and author of Sasquatch Journey Through the Veil. You can pick that up on Amazon, and I'd highly recommend it. Samantha is one of my favorite researchers and one of the first people to really open my eyes to the paranormal, things like cloaking, and all kinds of interesting experiences. So Samantha, very pleased to have you on the show. Thanks again for coming on. And if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into research.
You know, I'm actually originally from the state of Kentucky. We moved to a house that had a large parcel of woods that I used to go out to all the time. And I would go rake trails and, you know, make little path areas and clean up woods and things like that. So if anybody was watching me in the woods, they would have known that I was that kind of person. So that went on for a long time as I was growing up and was kind of in the scouting program a little bit. And as I got older, you know, I eventually had to leave because economically I moved off to a different part of the country. And I had got married. And your life gets in the way, though. You know, for so many years, in my 20s and 30s and part of the 40s, I had moved back and forth to Washington State during the 80s. And I really was always drawn to the Mount Rainier area. Always, we lived in Tacoma, and in those earlier years when my kids were being born, I always loved going up to the Cascades whenever I had a chance. And of course, there was a terrible economic downturn. About that time, I had to. I just got into the computer industry a few years before that, and found my niche in the computer programming. So I taught myself and was very adept at it, and took my skill set across the country to North Carolina, and was there for about 7 years. Set up shop and helped some people that had a garage operation. The company I actually went there for is faltered, and I got in with a few remaining people, a handful of people in the garage, and helped that operation take off. Today it's $1 billion company. So it's helped me a lot to do some of my research and not worry about trying to struggle from day to day, making a living and still do the research. That's a different story. I'll get to that. But eventually I was in North Carolina for about 7 years and got into the about 1997, and my dad had a stroke. So I moved to Kentucky. and that's where we're from, and went back there for 5 years. And still kind of reconnected with the woods that I originally went through all the time. I was just very drawn to, wanting to go out in the forest all the time. And that really didn't know why. I just felt like there was a presence watching or a presence communicating with me, but not even on a conscious level. And I was just kind of dismissing that. And eventually, something about 2002, I came into some money. And I was just laying in bed once, and something said, you need to go back out to Washington State. So I bought a plane ticket, went out there in 10 days, found a house, moved the entire family. So we moved to Tacoma, and we're studying in the very house that I had bought back in 2002. And I brought the family out here. Of course, I'm leading up to it. I know this is kind of more of the mundane part of the interview, but it does have a connection with what the drawing me here. But around, I started going through a lot of personal issues, and then some of them had to do with prior religious indoctrinations and things like that. I had been part of, and I won't say the denomination, but I was pretty much part of a cult. I finally had to figure that out after about 37 years. And then at the same time, my father finally died in 2007. And then 2 months later, that was in August, and in September, I found out my spouse of 20 years had contracted cancer, terminal cancer, and only had 3 years left. So I was pretty devastated. And the next 3 years, of course, were obviously hell on earth for me. So I got through that, and Toby eventually died, though, in 2010. So I was here alone pretty much, and I said I need to go back out. So I started making drives out to a place called out in the mountains, and I went a little bit further and found this place called Greenwater. And it was just a beautiful little village area, that I didn't know much about the place. Had a nice little tavern, a little coffee shop, sandwich shop, general store. Just a perfect little place, you'd want to go visit and hang around for the day. So I started going there off and on, and eventually I figured, I had my house in Tacoma. I'd really like to stay out here more often. So there was an RV for sale outside the tavern one day, and it was just the right price, and got them down a little bit on it. And I bought it, and I says, well, all we need is a place to put it. So the tavern actually has rental spots, camp spots, so I just parked it there, and it says, now I got a place to stay all the time. And that's when all the fun started.
So, Samantha, in your book, Journey Beyond the Veil, you speak about all these different experiences you've had in the forest. But prior to your awakening, what was your belief system around Bigfoot or Sasquatch?
As far as Bigfoot was concerned, I probably, like everyone else, just felt that it was a myth. I do remember, the thing I remember earliest from the 70s was the Patty film. Mainstream media was pretty much, that was just fake. If someone's in a monkey suit, and then I remember a part about someone with the footprints and everything, and someone faking those too. So after a couple of rounds of that, I pretty much dismissed it as just being fake. Okay, so it really didn't enter my consciousness much during all those years until I moved to Greenwater. And that's when the fun started. So you take a person that's very logical like myself, being a programmer. I started going through, and even right before I started having experiences of a Bigfoot time, I had started going through some spiritual changes in myself. And then and some psychic paranormal things started happening to me. So I found out I was very empathic. So I could almost tell you what you're thinking, not what you were thinking exactly, but exactly what you were feeling. And I could feel patterns in people and things like that. So that was kind of a skill I was starting to develop, or that was innate with me. Because the one thing I didn't mention about the time I was 13, I almost died. And I contracted some kind of disease that put me in the hospital for 2 months, and I had 107-degree temperature at one point. And they always say that when someone's near death, I even had the last rites by the Catholic priest given to me for that. And they always say that a person is near death, there's something that happens to them, and and stays with them for the rest of their life. And I believe that was the case with me. So
now, what do you, Samantha, when you say something happened to you, what do you feel happens in those situations? Because I'm really fascinated in that. I've seen research on, you know, when you're close to death, you may have an endogenous release of dimethyltryptamine or something like that within your system. But what did you notice after that? Because I've heard numerous people. I've even had spoken to people that were in surgery and kind of had the same experiences, I think, as what you're talking about. Well, what kind of experiences did you have, you know, post that kind of near-death experience?
Well, I should tell you that during the experience, I was having sensations of looking down at myself or feeling like gravity was twisted around, and it was, even though I was laying in the bed, I felt like I was laying against the wall. And then I had this, like I was traveling a little bit, and I was in this dark area, and I was seeing lights, lit areas, you know, through the hills and things like that. And it's just I was observing things, and it wasn't in the hospital room. So, and of course, I was given blood transfusions, a few other things. And well, once I got out of the hospital, there were some physical changes. My hair, most of my straight hair fell out. A lot of my very coarse straight hair, and it came in really wavy at that point. And then I started having some noticed personality changes in myself, and an intense desire to search out the meaning of life. You know, like, you know, there's something I need to look for, and I had that intense desire. It says there's something beckoning me. There is a mission. There's something that as I progress through my life, it will lead me to something. And that's been the case. I can honestly tell you that since I was 13, that definitely has been the case.
So you just kind of walked away from that with a knowing that you were on a path of discovery. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yes. That not just random discovery, that I was almost destined, like a destined type of, you're destined to do this, and you're destined to go the distance, and you're destined to discover. You're destined to go in a certain area and learn certain things.
Yeah, it's almost like it's not a choice. It just is. This is the direction I'm going, and there's no left, there's no right. There's only this direction.
Yeah. I mean, there's variances, obviously, in being able to, you know, make choices. Things I made plenty of mistakes in my life, but by and large, that I felt that this whatever the strong inward desire was keeping me on target, on path.
Now, Samantha, after these experiences and you became empathic, did you come out with any clairvoyance and ability to see things like future events?
More recently, I covered some of this in some of my writings, and a lot of this came about after the green water. So I would say a lot of this is happening just in the post-green water. So the event with Sasquatch, which I'll get into how I came across that, kind of like triggered a whole bunch of things at the same time. And it was interesting that one of it was even telekinesis, which was the ability to project and cause something to move, you know, mentally. And I was actually getting people upset. I found out that I had a pendulum that normally is used to get answers, you know, yes or no. If it goes up and down, it's yes, and back and forth, it's no. And I was looking at it, and I know people talk about, you know, you hold something that there's unconscious movements of the hand will make something shake one way or the other.
Sure, yeah.
That could be true with that, but I was able to concentrate and hold something extremely still and cause the thing to move wildly within seconds, you know, just from concentrating. And I noticed it was strongest if I put it up by the pineal gland, you know, right in front of the forehead, and concentrate. I could literally just like squint and just burst out energy and cause the thing just kind of fly away from my head and things like that. And I had a friend that actually came here from Australia. And, of course, I took her up to Greenwater, and I think the Bigfoot thing, you know, when I started talking about that kind of freaked her out a little bit. So we came back to Tacoma, and then we were sitting in a burger place, and I said, hey, this is something I can do. Let me show you this. And I was holding the pendulum, and I was showing how how I could just move this thing with like the hands holding it very still, and I'm able to take my other hand and like wave at it, and all of a sudden this thing would just start flying back and forth. And she says, "Give that to me." Grabs the pendulum and then locks her arms kind of like elbows on the table and clutched her fists together and holding the pendulum hanging down, and says, "Okay, I want to see you do it now." So I did the same thing. I started squinting and projecting, and now the pendulum didn't move, but all of a sudden she turned white as a sheet, and she looked like she was going to pass. So I said, "What's the problem?" She says, "Well, when you did that, I felt like a fist was pounding me in the chest every time you squinted." And I says, "Well, put the pendulum down. Let's just see if that has anything to do with it." And says, "Just put your fist up there and don't hold anything, and I'll do the same thing." And then I did the same thing, and then she almost passed out again because every time I squinted, she felt that pounding, almost a physical pounding against the chest area, and almost fell. Well, sad to say, she took off and hasn't contacted me since. That was 2014. So it was awfully frightening experience for her.
Samantha, what do you know about the pineal gland? Can you, enlighten our Sasquatch Syndicate listeners on the pineal gland, or are you have you studied that much at all?
All I can do is just repeat what I most of what I'm talking about tonight is just plain personal experiences, and I could just simply relate what I've read about it, and I know it's although I've done other research, and I know that the pineal gland tends to talk about it being kind of the gateway into other realities that we're not perceiving. So it's like whoever we are or whatever, it's almost like the communication hub of whatever we exist outside of this reality enables us to communicate through. And I think that when it comes to telepathy or some of the communication methods that don't involve actually speaking or anything like that actually takes place through the pineal gland.
I would certainly agree with that. I know that the pineal gland is also called the third eye, and the pineal gland is actually located directly in the center of your brain. And the pineal gland actually has rods and cones, just like our two eyes that we see on the front of our face. But it's a really interesting, and we call it a gland. It's a really interesting gland that, as you said, many call it the seat of the soul. And if you want to kind of get out there a little bit on a limb, they believe that the pineal gland is the gateway to, if you want to go down this road, to the soul entering and actually leaving your body. Many people or scientists have posited that when we're born, we get a large dump of dimethyltryptamine that activates our pineal gland when we're born, under near-death experiences, and when we actually die. So I find that kind of interesting when you put all of this anecdotal thought processes together, that it does awaken one in a specific way, and in a way I think that you've described. You seem, I've heard a lot of people say they just feel more open, as if they're able to receive or perceive things that they just simply weren't able to perceive prior. I know that, I've heard some folks say, they don't want to think of Sasquatch as quote-unquote paranormal. I had a conversation with Ron Moorhead, and you'll probably familiar with Ron Moorhead. He's
a friend.
Yeah, and it had a very interesting comment, which he said, I don't think that this is paranormal. It's just simply science that we don't understand yet.
Yeah, actually, that's a favorite term of mine, too. Paranormal is just simply science we don't understand yet.
Yeah, and it's interesting, but, you're one of the first researchers that really got me into cloaking. And out on our website, SasquatchSyndicate.com, you can get to believe in the paranormal section. But, there's a lot of different theories. Quantum physics, this ability that we vibrate at different frequencies, could that explain things that we're seeing out there? I was just curious, on what some of your thoughts are on some of those more interesting attributes in the paranormal and science we don't understand.
And they've established that humans could vibrate at a certain frequency. I'm not prepared to have those figures in front of me, but there's certain, common speeds that, that we tend to vibrate at. And yet, what if something does vibrate faster? If a creature was able to vibrate their atoms, their molecules in their body faster, what would that look like? How would that interact with our world? And, let me give you an example. In the case of something like there's a mismatch or something moves faster than the other, it's like being on two different frequency bands or slightly adjacent to each other. Don't you remember the old TV stations back when they were analog? And you used to use a channel changer to go from 2 to 3 to 4 and things like that, back when they actually broadcast over the air instead of over the cable. And there was time where you had maybe two cities that are a little bit close to each other. One was on channel 3, for instance, their television station. The other one's channel 4. And you just so happen to live kind of in between these two cities and just at the right point, especially with the weather being just right. And all of a sudden, you'd get a bleed-over effect from the other station. And then they used to call that, well, look at the ghost. You'd see the program. All of a sudden, you see ghostly images appearing on the program. That's the same concept. Is you have a bleed-over between channels. In the same way, when something starts to move away from our established vibration, and especially when they start to come closer, adjacent to it, there's a bleed over into our dimension.
Yeah, and I believe that it was Albert Einstein that said, everything is always in a constant state of motion. We're made up of atoms, and so it makes a lot of sense. It's interesting you're mentioning this stuff.
Cloaking, for instance, I would have never believed that until we actually had video of it. I mean, our first instance of that was with Barb Shoup, who is another well-known researcher in the area, and it was with a group of them, and she videotaped what she thought was some big black. She just happened to have her iPod on, pointed in a certain direction, and we reacted because something big and black jumped down and took off. Well, that's what everybody, whoever was looking that direction perceived. I heard it, but I didn't see it myself. And it wasn't until she sat down later that evening on her, she downloaded from her iPod into a Surface, the Microsoft Surface, so get a little bit bigger screen. And while she was sitting there on the lawn chair, we were all talking, and she's going, "Oh my God, oh my God." And it just alarmed us and ran on. "What's wrong, Barb?" It says, this is crazy. This is sci-fi stuff. And so we were looking at this video, and you can find it on the internet easy. On YouTube, it's called Cloaking, Bigfoot, Barb, and Gabby. And you'll see it for yourself. And what you see is all of a sudden there's greenery there. Then all of a sudden you see this thing jump down, and it's translucent. And it's just like a scene out of the Predator movie when he's up in the tree and jumps down. It's identical. And then you see the thing whip around and take off. It's the most bizarre thing you'll ever see in your life. And that was September 11th, 2014. And so the thing, I got to the point where I don't want to hear other people's stories, and I heard people talking about this before, and about Bigfoot.
So Samantha, you'd mentioned that you didn't actually see anything during the cloaking video until it was brought back onto the video itself. But have you had other physical encounters yourself?
I've had the screams. I would hear them first. I'd hear the hoops, and I said, "This is way too deep and way too loud for it to be a bird or anything like that, or an animal." And then I saw one jump across the tree behind our tavern, in town. I bet the most phenomenal one that I have seen was the day after September 11th of 2014, where the cloaking video took place. I went back in the same area, and this is where we're going to get in the sci-fi thing. And I'm just going to flat out tell you what I saw. You can take it for what it's worth, okay? I walked up the trail, and it was breezy up in that area. We call it the Field of Dreams, because it's kind of like a little valley in the middle of the woods. And it's feeling awfully electric up there, and I was by myself. I didn't bring any recording equipment whatsoever. At that point, I came back down. I turned around the trail and I was feeling euphoric for some reason, and that's when I actually spotted what looked like the light portal for the first time. This is a best description would be 4 sets of lights that look like Z's, like with a really long leg on the Z, coming down and over, in the form of a box, and suspended about 3 feet above the air. And at first I thought it was sunlight reflecting off the ground, but it was reflecting off of nothing. It was just glowing and pulsating and hovering above the ground. And I walked past it very carefully. I wasn't scared for any reason. I was just feeling kind of, well, you don't see that every day type of attitude, and I'm just looking. And I didn't want to take my eyes off it because it lasted about 30 seconds. And then I turned away for a second. And then when I did look back, it was still there, but now I saw what looked like the beach ball-sized orb that was floating in the air towards the end of the light portal. And its best description was like orange electrical energy around it, but it was somewhat translucent in the middle, kind of like a gigantic soap bubble. And the thing moved in between the 4 rods on the end of the portal, pulsed a few times, and as it was pulsing, then it just disappeared. This lasted about 45 seconds. I mean, my world was pretty much, it was one thing about the cloaking, and it could be the Bigfoot or whatever we saw the day before, but this was over the top for me, and it was obviously related. So,
Samantha, you said that you felt euphoric.
For me, it was extremely euphoria of just being happy about things, and then seeing that, I just stood there and just watched this thing. I wasn't feeling any other emotion of fear or anything like that when I was watching this. So, and if it's implied that something caused this, then something implanted that, But I don't think so because, well, I'll tell you why. Things like that don't leave physical evidence. Okay? When I came back out there, I decided to go back out. I didn't go back out there for a good week and a half or something like that. And I went back out and located the same spot. And as bizarre as this may sound, on the ground was a perfect triangle, seared into the ground. Now this area is rocky, first of all, and it's patches of grass because it's kind of a fieldish area, and debris underneath the grass, whatever was there, it was seared. There was a root system that actually come up a little bit. It was seared across roots, almost like something. Well, you know how a laser would just simply slice through something, and it had that effect all the way across the ground. I got a picture in my book of that, of this perfect triangle that was right below where this portal was seen. And I tried to do radiation checks and things like that. Nothing came up on the Geiger counter or anything like that. But that's what I had.
Samantha, when you were talking about the orb and the portal hovering, was it spherical, or how would you describe that?
The light, well, I call it the portal, but it looked like a set of light beams. Might have been attached to a ship of some sort. That part might have been invisible, but what was visible was these. The best description of these lights would have been like the Star Wars lightsabers, how they glow and everything. But there's 4 of them arranged in a rectangular. Like a square box with sides. These are the edges. So there's 4 of these lights, and at the end of these lights, they all go down exactly 90 degrees, and then go out 90 degrees. So they're like Z-shaped, and there were 4 of them, perfectly aligned with each other to form like this box configuration shape, rectangular shape.
So Samantha, as you kind of, think back through that, what were the events that kind of, led up to putting 2 and 2 together that, hey, these 2 phenomenon could be possibly related?
one event led to another, which led to them being there. And matter of fact, the same day that I went out to check and found the triangle in the ground, I had my cell phone, so I was taking pictures of that. And then it was also sunny. It was kind of a sunny day, and it just so happened to look up on the ridge, and I was looking for shadow. This is where I came into this thing we were talking earlier about the ultraviolet light spectrum and the darkness. And I just happened to be looking up on the ridge, and that's when I had the original encounter with the big guy. I was looking up this ridge, and I was seeing, how shadows, with the trees create the shadows below the trees and everything
Sure.
as you're going up the hill. But then there was this one spot between these two trees where the darkness was so dark that you couldn't even see anything behind it. In other words, why is this area much darker than the surrounding shadows? As I started staring at it, I was kind of cocking my head sideways a little, looking, and I'm seeing the blackness move. Almost like it was waving. I mean, when I say waving, I don't mean like a hand waving. It was like a big black blanket or film, and it was just kind of like waving in and out, almost like when you see a mirage. When the heat hits the pavement, you're looking from a side distance, you see this really black spot, and it's kind of moving. This is what I saw between the two trees. And my eyes, of course, being what they are, good old set of old human eyes with limited perception, couldn't really see the detail in there. But something told me on the inside, it's just, I think there's somebody there. And so I just simply waved at it, just made an assumption that's probably the Bigfoot. And I took a picture with my cell phone. And waited 15 seconds. I think I walked in a little bit closer, and then I took another picture. So later when I went home to, take a look at that, thank goodness the computer, and as much as people knock color processing, Photoshop, or when it's not used for the purpose of manipulating the image as much as, changing it as much as enhancing it. And the technique, what I did was I was able to put that on the computer, and by looking close, even on the original image, what I couldn't see with my eye on the cell phone, I could see the image of the body. I could actually see some detail there, and I went ahead and did some enhancements or some contrasting, which kind of helped bring out the detail a little bit. And then what I came out was there is someone, it was a Sasquatch, smiling at me, with his hand extended out, waving back at me, while his other hand was holding the branch, or whatever he was holding on to. And then when I looked at the second photo that I took 15 seconds later, as I moved closer, this time he's still standing there, but his head's like turned to the side, like he's talking to somebody, he's pointing at me. So it's like, I think you can see us. I think you can see us, And I mean, it's all that stuff is clear on my site and everything. I've done a video on that, which you can actually see this, And that's where I started learning more about this whole thing, about their ability to hide from us. They're hiding in plain sight. That's my favorite term for that, because of whatever technique they're using for cloaking techniques, like the color band disparity between our vision and theirs, or what they're able to hide in, or whether it's through quantum vibration. The difference between the vibration between our world and what they're able to vibrate into, so we can't see them. All that has a basis in science. And, this is what I'm trying to tell you, One of the things I'm trying to point people, it's not just a bunch of, I'm tired of people thinking, no, it's not possible. But science is proving things every day.
Samantha,
yeah.
Samantha, as you were speaking, as looking at that black, and it was, not sure if I'm using the right word, but it was shimmering or moving on some level. Does it almost remind you on a hot day, as you're gazing across the land, how you can see whatever you're looking at is wavering just a little bit because of the heat that's coming up is actually bending and moving those light rays. So really, it appears from what you're telling me that you were seeing light rays that were being manipulated in that area as it relates to other areas around it, which goes right up the alley, as far as you say, as far as changing their vibration.
Well, yeah, they're able to. I honestly believe, this is my opinion, that light is nothing but another form of electromagnet. It's just like radio waves, but much, much higher. And light has properties, can be bent. I mean, you can use like a TV tube, the old cathode ray tube, could bend electrons based on magnetic, waves, or pulling the way. That's how the picture tube works back in those days. And the same thing here is that if you could electromagnetically cause light to bend around you, well, from your eyes standpoint, what you're looking at is whatever's behind the creature, because all the light's just been simply being like compressed around and then uncompressing back around where like nothing's there. Now, something physically is there. If you ran, you would actually touch it and hit it. I mean, physically touch it. And I like to use the illustration of a fan. Now, if the fan's not running, you can see the blades. Turn the fan on high, you can look through it. I can see everything that's behind the fan on the other side. But stick your hand in there and see there's a different matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for our listeners, when you're speaking of light, the light spectrum, our visible light spectrum, imagine, just for our listeners, if you were to right now, for our listeners, to open your arms wide from left to right, you've got probably a 5 or 6 foot span there. The visible spectrum for us would occupy probably about 3 inches of that space. So everything on either side of that 3 inches we cannot see. So there's a whole lot of room for a creature that can manipulate light or do something like that to hide in. Yeah.
And the thing is, and the Sasquatch were instrumental in because I had a subject to study. I mean, you start out in this field. First, I think you start getting into these levels of thinking about it. You start out being an unbeliever. Then you have a sighting, so you start thinking, well, this, maybe this is an ape running out in the woods. Then you realize, no, this is an intelligent creature. Then you realize that you start moving up the ladder. It says, there's more to this than just a physical being. And it says there's some special abilities that this being's portraying, And then you finally realize at some point that you're not just studying the Sasquatch. That's not the only thing in the woods that's invisible to us. Then you start to realize there's a whole bunch of other types of beings that supposedly in mythology that said just myths may be real. Little people, gnomes, fairies, all these things. It opens the door and the possibility that all these things are actually real. And because you can't dismiss it at the point, once you establish the fact that cryptids have certain characteristics and abilities to hide outside of our perception, then you have to open the door to everything else. And I will say to you and the listeners that that I have garnered several photos of what clearly look like other types of cryptids, much, much smaller than even humans, but look like humanoid.
Samantha, when you started your research, you probably had a hypothesis, whether it was an ape or a hominid or an alien or what have you. Can you tell us, tell our listeners about what you felt about this creature from the onset, and then as your research progressed, did that change what you felt this creature might have been? In other words, did it start out as a flesh and blood and turn into something other than that?
Yeah, I mean, and I think in the beginning, it started out, it was just a myth. I'm a non-believer. I don't believe it. Loved Harry and the Hendersons movie, but it's a great piece of fiction. Okay, so you start out like that, and that's the way I started out. Until I start seeing this thing run, okay, there's this creature, and I'm thinking it's kind of like an apish creature. I'm not sure if I really kind of went along that line about it, but I just felt like, because I was working with Barb Shoup in the beginning, who was telling me about this, and I had no reason to disbelieve her because I was starting to experience the sounds and everything. So there's some intelligence here. So I think on the onset, I never thought in terms of an animal as much as I felt that it was a new breed of man or a hairier breed of man that was actually inhabiting the woods. Although at the time, I thought they just kept themselves well hidden without the need for special abilities, but never could understand how they could come into play so quickly around us and then disappear. So, I mean, that's what happens is you start seeing these things happen, and then you say, there's something wrong here. A normal human or a normal animal or a normal flesh and blood being just simply couldn't pull this off all the time, And I finally come to the realization, dealing with something that just simply can just walk up to you, you wouldn't know it, and then touch you on the back or whatever, and then just disappear.
Yeah, I find it fascinating you mentioned this because, as Paul and I kind of started our own research decades ago, and then, of course, through time and experiences and talking to all sorts of folks on their encounters, there's something else at work. And, as much as we'd like it to be flesh and blood and, we want Bigfoot back. We want it cradling a baby. It lives in a gland. It's, an undiscovered ape or relic hominid. There's something else at play. And, it's hard to get our minds around everything we're hearing, from the tribes or, talking about it being a protector of the natural world, all of the different information out there, as well as, paranormal theory and new scientific discoveries. I'm just curious, what you've heard or seen.
You're kind of leading into the next level. What I feel that from a technology standpoint, I feel that they do have access to technology. I also believe they have natural abilities that allow them to do what they're doing. The cloaking, or one of the videos I have, morphing Bigfoot slow speed version. If you search on YouTube, you'll pull up the video of what I took, and you can actually see this thing clearly materializing in the middle of the screen. You can actually see the head, and the head's shaping, and the head's moving or transforming itself, and then kind of just phases out of scene. So we're kind of establishing that this is, after a while, once you've been a serious researcher and you've been honest to yourself, you finally come to these conclusions. This is real. Now, do you get help with technology? I think technology is involved too. One of the things, I alluded to, I talked about that light beam portal. I call it a portal, whatever it was, in the orb that I saw. I believe it still opens up and closes there all the time. One time was the very next year, past the time when I said I saw that portal, went back out there and decided I was going to go ahead and talk about that issue. I waited a whole year to talk about that because, you deal with this ridicule. Like, you talk about Bigfoot, now you're going to talk about space portals. But anyway, I decided to go ahead and videotape. I took my video camera, so I was going to do a walkthrough, and as I was walking, I was just going to kind of like focus the camera on and talk about the story, about what I saw in that 45 seconds and how it came about. And I did a video on it. And while I was doing that, I went up there, and all of a sudden I was hearing the stick. I hear a lot of stick knocks. They communicate with me, and it says they slam. They create slamming sounds on the ridge all the time, and they were particularly loud this particular time. Like they were really upset about something, or they were trying to get my attention. And I yelled up there and says, I'd like to, this is great that you're doing all that, but I'm really here for a different reason, and to actually document about what happened the year before. So I went ahead and kind of ignored them up on the ridge, and I went ahead and videotaped this. Well, I got that video out of my YouTube channel, and then all of a sudden, a user says, looking at it, says, well, what about that big black creature that shows up on your video? I said, what creature? So I had to go back and look at my video, and sure enough, here's, based on the tree length, after I did a comparison with myself standing next to the tree, We're talking about 12 or 13 feet tall. And this thing materializes in the head and everything. You see the mouth, the eyes. You see it start smiling. You can see the white of the teeth. And then it turns its head to the side. So that happened. That happened in like August of 2015. And then September 9th of 2015. So I went back through and I walked that same area. I turned around. I walked past it. Nobody was there. I walked past the place where the portal was before. And then I went to the end of the field of dreams, I call it, and I just simply turned around and took a picture directly in that area. I later went back home, and I was looking at the picture, and it says, there's two beings standing there. One kind of looked like a Bigfoot, and I thought, and I almost missed this because it was so close in color, it was almost cloaked. I took a closer look at it, and it was not a Sasquatch. It was some kind of, looked like a female alien being that was standing there in shock. You could see it looking straight at me. There was a younger one that looked like it was pointing my direction, so I think I spoofed them by turning around and taking the picture. And obviously it had a pleated top on, and ears kind of looked pointed. It actually had a hairstyle. That's something else I put on my site and everything, one of the pictures. And I clearly, okay, you got aliens involved here too now. They're showing up in the portal. They're working with the Bigfoots. And since then, strange things being what they are, I've started having instances where I go back to my house in Tacoma. I'd look up and there'd be a silver sphere that was just outside of a cloud. And as I looked up, it just kind of moved its way slowly behind the cloud, like watching me. So there's 3 different instances where I've seen this happen, just coincidentally. Coincidence? I don't think so. They got my number,
Samantha, have you experienced anything as it relates to any ESP, telepathy, mind speak, any kind of experiences like that?
I'd be lying if I said no.
All right, well, don't lie to us. Can you tell us about them?
I said I was empathic, which means I could feel. Now, I've heard of people with mind speak, and there's several. A few, I just had dinner with a friend, they, to the point where they talk in their mind and they actually give them names and everything. Well, I haven't been fortunate. Maybe my pineal gland needs to be decalcified a little bit more to get to that point. Who knows? But the thing is, I empathically feel. When I go to the woods, I could feel what they're feeling. So what I have to do is when I feel what they're feeling, I have to interpret that feeling like into actual thoughts. And that's what happens. It turns into thoughts, and then it becomes, this is, I understand their intentions. I understand the things that are important. Then I start feeling what they're feeling, about humans, about our destiny or working with them and everything like that. So,
Samantha, do you believe that this connectedness allows you to have more interactions? And if you wouldn't mind sharing for our listeners, what are some of those experiences you've had?
I actually had young ones run up to me, in the middle of the night. Just some of the funniest stories in the world. I'm thinking like, I'm going to get up in the middle of the night from my tent, and I'm a little, we're in the middle of this dark, deep part of the forest, 15 miles in some more remote area, and then the fire pit that I'm right next to is out, and I don't want to walk over to the outskirts of camp because there's a bathroom tent over there. I said, okay, I'll just get outside my tent and take care of business there. And then as I do that, the next thing you know, something jumps down a tree, runs right in front of me, runs right around the fire pit, and big and black, and it wasn't the dog. It was... And then I had this on recording, too. I actually recorded this thing, and you could hear it grunting. And then it takes off, and then I later, as I was paying attention to that, what I caught right after that was the intense, heavy breathing of an adult directly behind me as I was looking. So it's just very funny that, I'm trying to ave them 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they all just kind of come out because they are practical jokers. I'm telling you right now, they are practical jokers.
So Samantha, I know that, over the years you've done research, along the way with Barb and Gabby and Jax, and, what type of behaviors did you experience in the dogs? Stan Gordon always says you can fool humans, but you can't fool the animals. I was just curious on what you've seen.
Well, Jack's the newest member of the Barb and Gabby team, so, yeah, I love those two dogs to death, and especially Gabby, because I usually go to bars and visit Gabby and her. But, I will speak as far as Gabby is concerned. When Gabby goes out, when I go out with him, one of the important things is that Gabby's kind of, what we look for is all of a sudden we'll be walking along and then Gabby stops, and she's looking intently in a certain direction. So that's when we're kind of looking in the same direction. It says, "What do you see, Gabby?" And she keeps looking, and I'm going to pull my camera out and take a picture in that direction. Because obviously, dog's eye, they can see things that we can't see. Goes back to that perception range that animals are able to see things. So, yeah, by all means, if you have a pet, pay attention to your pet. Your pet can definitely, either save you or point your attention to something you just totally miss,
Samantha, as you have, had these experiences, have you ever experienced, with your empathic abilities, have you perhaps, has it ever felt like you've channeled the consciousness of Bigfoot?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about that, and what did it feel like? What was that experience like?
Well, it's kind of like what I explained. It's thoughts that get put, it's feelings that get translated into thoughts into usable English language that you and me can understand, about intentions. And I get the inner feeling of one of the things that it's kind of like maybe you knew things all along, but you just kind of forgot. I mean, they're in your mind. You need triggers to kind of bring these things out. They're kind of like triggers to bringing out the feelings, and all of a sudden knowledge is coming into being about different things. When I go on the internet, if I'm reading something, automatically there's a filter that's going, that's not true. That's correct. And then based on that, and I'm able to remember things that we as humans probably forgot in our consciousness but are coming to light right now. And I always consider myself at this point in time a light worker. And it goes beyond the whole Sasquatch thing. This just goes into a different area. But I'm starting to realize that, what goes on this planet is a lot more insidious than what people think. The whole history of the planet is just fabricated. That, if you think people are just running this planet, think again, I was just hearing something about the Council of Nine and some very, shadow government, but deep levels of that. And I come to realize that, we're, when it comes to extraterrestrials are real, they're here. They've always been here, and we're fooling ourselves with, the whole point with our creation and the creation of the Sasquatch and the hybridization of our species isn't real. I mean, you better think again.
One of the reasons I asked you about if you've channeled Bigfoot's consciousness, and it took a while for me to even talk to Chuck about this. It was I was with a very large group. It was a meditation group, and we were in Colton, Oregon, which is that area is the Clackamas River drainage, which is the top 10, Bigfoot sighting area in the U.S. And for a period of about 10 minutes, I actually channeled Bigfoot's consciousness. It was a gift that was given to me, is what I was told. I was allowed, of course, my eyes are shut, and I'm looking through I guess the closest thing I can tell you is through my mind's eye, or my pineal gland, perhaps how it was communicating to me. But for about 10 minutes, I sat and watched this creature through the view of, and it was a male. It was a large male. Through the view of his eyes, it was interesting. I really wasn't allowed to ask any questions, and I think you Samantha will understand this, and probably some of our listeners will that have had some experiences like this. I really wasn't able to ask any questions. What it was just simply a gift. And as this creature is walking through the woods, one of the biggest gifts it gave me there was just to feel its consciousness. And I will tell you that this creature had this ability to perceive if there was I will just say a disturbance in the force in an area nearby. Now, what I was shown by this creature, you know, as adults, we grow up, we get serious, we get jaded, and there's a certain energetic signature that type of person leaves. And I know that folks that have walked into a room full of people laughing, it's contagious, right? Oh, you start to laugh. And I also know that you've encountered an individual that when you got around them, their energy or just the feeling that they gave you was really unpleasant and really uncomfortable because of that. It was just the opposite of being a child and having that pure innocence. That's really what that Bigfoot showed me was as it's going through its environment, it can actually sense some of those consciousnesses of other beings, but the ones that remain a bit hidden to Sasquatch are children, people that are very centered, very similar to, I feel, what your personality is.
Yeah, they see emotions like we see physical things. They can actually, when they sense, they could see an individual coming up the trail. They could feel the rage, or they could feel the disposition of that person. And animals do that a little bit, but the Sasquatch definitely can pick up. They know the aura. I want to call it the aura.
Yeah,
maybe
exactly.
The aura has different colors. That aura is very red, or that aura is very yellow, or whatever. But here comes one that's just bright blue, or just beautiful to look at. The aura coming from that person, and that's what they're seeing. They're seeing the aura from all sorts of living things. And it's just like you were talking about channeling. This is how it happens to me. It's spontaneous, and it comes to me like you bring me a question or something, and all of a sudden I'll start to tell you some things. And that's them communicating their thoughts to me. And maybe even on the spur of the moment, just like I'm telling you right now that you can see auras.
So speaking of extrasensory perception and, you know, the ability to use your sixth sense and pineal gland or third eye, you know, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that the government puts fluoride in our water to help calcify that gland, which kind of closes down our ability to be as intuitive to our surroundings. And I'm just curious, you know, what your thoughts are on that around the conspiracy theory and why people believe that the government might be doing that.
It's all about control. Everything's about control. The human race, of course, is awakening. It's starting to wake up. We can see that already. And the thing is, they don't want that because, you know, these groups have agendas, and one of the agendas is they don't want, you know, there's the depopulation agenda that I think everybody has done, and even a little bit of research knows that there seems to be an agenda. If there's less of us, it'd be easier to control more, you know. But the thing is, we were talking about all these special abilities that the Sasquatch have. Maybe, I'm just throwing this out there, that all the stuff they put in the water, whether it's fluoride, all the stuff they put in the food, the chemicals, the stuff they're spraying the air in the chemtrails or whatever, all for the purpose of suppressing our abilities that could be very similar. So all along, we have suppressed abilities thinking this is our natural state. And if we were actually in a world where we weren't so subjugated to all this stuff, you know, attacking our system, our natural system, that their fear is that if we woke up to our complete potential, whether physically, spiritually, energetically, then they'd be in big trouble. They'd be in big trouble, whoever the controllers are, because then they know they could not put us under control. See, they control by fear. See, they feed off of fear. That's what they're getting from the human race. The human race is very powerful. We emanate all this fear, and that's energy to them. You know, this is the minute we stop emanating fear, then their history.
Oh, yeah. I just, pretty much all of our pineal glands are calcified through preservatives in food, fluoride, and just as you said, Samantha, just additives that are being added into our food supply. And it's calcified to the extent that they actually use it as a bellwether. So if you have a brain X-ray, they actually use your calcified pineal gland, which is about the size of a grain of rice. It's not large, but they use that calcified pineal gland as a marker. So if that calcified pineal gland is moved to the left slightly, that means that there is a tumor in the right side of your brain, pushing it either way. But I would actually absolutely agree with you that there is something to the pineal gland, something that allows us to perhaps have more empathic abilities that the government has actually studied. They've studied the pineal gland. They've studied dimethyltryptamine, but what they're finding is that it allows us to just ascend to a higher level of consciousness, which is very uncomfortable for a government or perhaps a religion that's trying to control you.
No, definitely.
All right. Well, this has been a fantastic hour. Again, Samantha, thanks for coming on Sasquatch Syndicate and sharing your truth. We know that folks like yourself that have special abilities oftentimes lack the courage to come out and share their truth. But, our show is very open, and we really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been very enjoyable. Very relaxed. I've been on a number of programs. One, of course, was about a 4-hour stint on one program that just literally beat me up, I think. But this has been more conversational and a little bit, just letting them, just flowing what I consider. This is some of the more important things I wanted to cover that I couldn't do it on other shows before.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the feedback, and certainly we're happy to be the platform to help get your message across. Also, if you're out there and you're listening to the show and you might have your own special abilities and theories around this being and, of course, the paranormal, please contact the show. You can hit us up at sasquatchsyndicate.com and click contact. Paul, any final thoughts?
Samantha, what would you say to the skeptics right now on the couch? Is there anything else that you might want to share, any experience or any last words?
Well, I'm just going to say that, the armchair skeptics, that there are people that do it just to be doing it. I don't probably have anything to say to them, but ones that are skeptical about it says don't believe my opinion or anybody else's. Go for yourself. Go experience it for yourself. Take a walk in the woods, and put the intention out there that you want to have an experience. And it won't take long before, if your heart's in the right place, it won't take long before you're actually having this. And so, personal experience is the best proof that you could possibly have.
This concludes our April 2019 podcast. Sasquatch Syndicate will return on Friday, May 1st. Thanks to all of our listeners and those that have been out to our website and those following us on social media. Sasquatch is a controversial subject, so for all the believers and disbelievers and those that will tell you they have all the answers, just remember, we're flying through space at 700 miles per hour. Buckle up.